So hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the HELiX Focus Session. Thank you everyone to participate in this session. This session titled Scaling Up Cash and Voucher Assistance, Key Challenges and Opportunities in Financial Service Providers, Procurement including Data Protections. The speaker for today is from IFRC and ICRC. I would like also to share a little bit of house rules. So please rename your name on the screen using your name and then your organization, so we know where you are from. And then please turn off your microphone and video unless you are speaking. If you have questions, comments, you can put it in the chat box. We will respond to you. There will be also dedicated the Q&A session. But in addition to that, please put your questions on the chat box before you forget. Also, you can use the reaction button to share your feedback. Also, be on point. So we will have a number of participants. So just to ensure that everybody has a chance to speak. Towards the end of this session, I will also share a link to the feedback forms. Hopefully, you can fill in the feedback forms later on, and we will end with the group photos. So again, thank you very much, and I will hand over the screen to Michael. Michael, the session is yours.
Great, thank you, Andrew. And good afternoon, everyone, and greetings from Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. And welcome to the focus session under Theme 1, Estimating Basic Needs and Addressing Basic Needs. Our session is entitled Understanding Key Challenges and Opportunities in Financial Service Providers Procurement, including data protection. This session will showcase key experiences of the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement in negotiating contracts with financial service providers to deliver cash and voucher assistance to the people affected by crisis. The session will discuss key challenges usually faced in negotiating service agreements with FSPs, and we'll also touch base on data protection and how we can identify a few mitigation measures in those related risks. Just to give you a quick background, in an emergency context, such as conflict or natural disaster, many humanitarian actors rely on their own delivery mechanisms when it comes to providing the most vulnerable people with in-kind assistance. And I think most of us are all master of delivering in-kind assistance, such as food kits, shelter materials, and other essential household items. But over the years, I think we have seen the growth of using cash and voucher assistance as part of the humanitarian response. So providing people with cash forms of assistance, however, usually relies on contracting the delivery of the assistance to a financial service provider or FSPs, especially for large-scale deliveries. This is typically done to avoid the risk associated with transporting large volume of physical cash, such as humanitarian vehicles being targeted for theft, or the risk of costly losses due to accidents. An experienced financial service provider can usually also offer considerable cost savings due to having an efficient distribution system in place that would be relatively costly for a humanitarian organization to replicate. The use of the same service provider, the FSP, by multiple organizations can also help diffuse this cost more widely than if each developed their own cash distribution systems independently. And logistics support is a critical prerequisite to cash and voucher assistance at all stages, from preparedness to monitoring and even to program evaluation. And the timely support of logisticians, including cash feasibility assessment, market analysis, procurement, and monitoring of suppliers is necessary to achieve comprehensive understanding of different options to address the needs of the communities. And logistics is also key to program design, contributing to increasing speed and scale and quality of cash and voucher response as a modality to deliver humanitarian assistance. As this is a focus session, as this is a focus discussion, we will try to discuss and give insights on the following questions. First, what are the cash and voucher assistance mechanisms and corresponding transfer solutions? What are the current experiences and challenges we have in negotiations with FSPs? And lastly, what is data protection and why do we need to talk about data protection with cash and with cash and voucher assistance? So for this session, we are lucky to be joined by experienced female strong humanitarian practitioners. So we have Chhavi Sinha, who we will introduce more on later from ICRC. We're also joined in by Ellaine Luzada from Philippine Red Cross and me, Pham Thanh from Vietnam Red Cross. The session will last for 90 minutes. And as mentioned by Andrew, feel free, if you have questions while we are presenting, feel free to use the chat box to write in your questions and we will get back to those and we will have a dedicated time for question and answers later. So first, I think that let's define cash and voucher assistance. I think practically this is the most practical definition I could find. So basically, cash and voucher assistance is the provision of cash and or vouchers to individuals, households, and communities to enable them to obtain and access goods and services even. There are many ways in which humanitarian aid can be delivered to people in crisis. Traditionally, organization would distribute goods such as blankets, tents, foods, and other essentials. And cash is essentially the same thing. Where a set of amount of cash or voucher is given to people who can use it to purchase things that they really need at a time. Many people prioritize, especially during or after emergency, people will normally prioritize food, shelter, paying for school fees, medical bills, even repayment of debts, and sometimes investing into small businesses. As cash distribution comes in many forms, such as cash transfers, electronic cash, vouchers, cash reward programs. The chosen method is determined by how people normally access cash, whether the markets are functioning, what technology is available, and how many people need to be reached. And sometimes it is possible to transfer cash through already existing government mechanisms, such as the social safety net, which is, I think, growing in terms of experience, especially in our region. But for this session, we will specifically look into only this component, which is looking into the delivery mechanisms and the modalities. So cash distributions are not necessarily new. I think new within the humanitarian sector, but they're gaining prominence as a flexible and versatile tool to meet complex needs for people in crisis. And I think over the past 10 years, there's been a lot of research around cash, and cash is one of the most heavily researched topic in the humanitarian world. And I think to discuss more on the delivery mechanisms and varied transfer solutions, I will give the floor to Chhavi. So Chhavi is our cash logistics and market specialist from the ICRC. I think she's covering half of the world, covering Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Northern Africa. So over to you, Chhavi. You're on mute, Chhavi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Michael. Now that Michael has explained briefly what we refer to as CVA, let us look at the most popularly used mechanisms and related cash transfer solutions in the region. So there are basically three types of mechanisms that we use for delivering CVA in the humanitarian sector, and most popularly within this region, the ASEAN region. The first mechanism is using direct cash distribution. Direct cash distribution offers two different type of cash transfer solutions. Number one being cash in envelopes. I think this is the traditional way that we are all familiar with, and we all are aware that we started off by distributing cash in envelopes, and as much as it is losing its shine, it is still prevalent in certain contexts where digital cash cannot be deployed. But of course, it comes with a wide variety of risk. So people are looking into other digital solutions. But yes, direct cash can be provided by using cash in envelope. The second cash transfer solution that can be availed under the direct way of providing CVA is by issuing checks issued in the names of beneficiaries. And these checks are issued by ICRC or the implementing agency's corporate account. And it is not necessary that the beneficiary should have pre-existing accounts or bank accounts to encash this check. They can basically walk into any branch, FSP, any bank branch for encashing this over the counter by showing or providing their ID. So direct cash distribution can be delivered using two cash transfer solutions, cash in envelope and through checks. The second very popular mechanism that has recently gained a lot of popularity, and which is the one that most of us in the humanitarian sector are exploring and still exploring. As you know, as technology evolves, more and more solutions come out there. This is the second mechanism, is the most popular one that is of much interest to the humanitarian sector, and that is delivering cash by contracting FSPs, that is financial service providers. Of course, there are many, as I mentioned, as technology evolves, many cash transfer solutions are out there in the market, and it is still evolving, and there'll be more innovation, there'll be more creation. But of course, along with it, a lot of data is also being circulated, which we will touch base on the challenges later in the presentation. Cash transfer through FSPs can basically, the most popular 7 solutions that can be cash transfer solutions can be availed by using FSPs, is by using personal accounts or group accounts of beneficiaries. This is the type of cash transfer solution wherein the funds are transferred directly into the bank account of the individual beneficiary, or in a group account or community account, which is managed by community leaders or by a community group. And with this bank account, they are offered additional facilities like the ATM card, debit card, credit card, so that they have easy access to cash at any given point of time. So this is really a good solution, provided the beneficiaries have access to bank accounts. So personal account and group account are two ways of offering or delivering funds to the affected population. The third cash transfer solution that can be availed under FSP, using FSPs, is the identity protected ATM card. Identity protected ATM card is a solution wherein beneficiaries are distributed cards, and these cards are topped up using the corporate account of the implementing agency, which in this case may be ICRC, and as such, no personal details or data of beneficiaries are mandated to be shared with the FSP. This is definitely very, very useful solution, cash transfer solution in sensitive operating environments, especially in an operating context where the beneficiary falls under a sensitive group category. But unfortunately, the flip side of this is that not many FSPs are willing to provide this kind of transfer solution, as they are not amenable to customize their service, this kind of service. But it is still worth exploring this kind of option with FSPs in your country when considering implementing CVA program. The fourth kind is a prepaid card. This I think we all are aware of in some sort of the other, or it is also referred as stored value card, where a certain value is preloaded within the card, and you can use this card, whether it be in a token voucher or a plastic card voucher format, can be availed for buying and purchasing goods and services. But up to a certain limit that has been loaded in the card. The fifth one is over the counter. This encashment over the counter, the beneficiaries can be organized. This can be organized in the premises of the FSP, such as the bank, the post office, or by using authorized network agents, a wide network of agents that of the FSP. So this can be arranged in two ways: either by using them by visiting their premises, their office or shop, and you go to the counter, you present your token or ID proof of entitlement, and you can get your encashment over the counter. Or in some circumstances, some FSPs also offer to mobilize their employees and agents to set up ad hoc over-the-counter distribution in the field. Now, this is a very useful solution in certain contexts where it is difficult to deploy digital cash, or the infrastructure is not available, or it is very difficult for beneficiaries to go to the nearest outlet or branch of an FSP to encash the token that has been provided to them. So this over-the-counter distribution is also a very beneficial type of cash transfer solution that can be availed using an FSP. The other, the 6 and the 7 are closely related. They are more or less the same, but their modality is a little different. Mobile money is usually kept digital in market environments where the beneficiary can pay or buy using mobile technology, or by where they can pay or buy using mobile technology, or they can visit the premises or shop of the mobile network operator, or any of the authorized outlets of the mobile service operator. Certain banks and post offices can also draw up independent contracts with the mobile company so as to facilitate cash out services, as well as financial technical providers can also enter into a partnership with the mobile network operator and provide cash out services by using their network. So you can see, as technology has evolved, we have evolved from the traditional way of cash in envelopes to outsourcing and mitigating our risks or reducing our risks by delivering CVA using financial service providers through some of these commonly used cash transfer solutions. Now, so we have direct cash distribution. We can do cash through using FSPs. And then there's another third mechanism, which is by setting up a voucher activities using vendor for the activities. In this kind of mechanism, we can have two cash transfer solutions. We basically have two cash transfer solutions. One is gift cards. In some locations operating context, some supermarkets can provide gift cards, which are considered as value vouchers. The contracting process for this is relatively simple, as opposed to setting up a full-fledged voucher program wherein you need to start right from the scratch, the printing vouchers, reconciliation process, distributing vouchers. So that requires a lot of work, and this all can be mitigated if we have in your operating context a supermarket that has gift cards that can be used as value vouchers. So this is also a very useful cash transfer solution using the voucher mechanism. Now, the other three types are closely related, but they refer to the different type of vouchers that we have. So now we don't, initially, of course, we're only using paper vouchers. So any type of voucher, whether it be a paper voucher or an e-voucher, can be used as a value voucher or a commodity voucher. In certain concepts, certain e-vouchers can serve both purposes, as a value voucher and a commodity voucher. And they can serve both purposes simultaneously, and they can also bear a wallet to facilitate encashment services. So you can even have a wallet in these kind of e-token vouchers and facilitate encashment services. What is important to remember when you use these kind of e-voucher services, whether it be a value voucher, commodity voucher, paper voucher, or e-voucher, is that the suppliers involved in producing or printing vouchers should not have any direct link to the vendors involved in the voucher activity, so as to avoid any kind of malpractice. So this is the only flip side, but again, it is a useful solution in certain operating contexts where we have to use these kind of solutions. So you can see, I mean, to wrap it up, there are three different mechanisms: direct cash distribution, CVA through FSPs, CVA delivery through using setting up voucher activities, programs, and using vendors. And with them come different type of solutions, as you can see. Cash and envelope, checks, 7 types of cash transfer solutions using FSP. You could use a personal account, group account, identity protected ATM card, prepaid card, over the counter, mobile money, used either as cash out or for purchasing goods and services. And under voucher activities, you could use two main cash transfer solutions, that is using gift cards or e-voucher, paper voucher, or financial technology providing or certain vouchers issued specifically or customized for the agency using financial technology providers such as Red Rose. So now that we have understood the 3 mechanisms and the solutions that come along with it, it is important also to just bear in mind some of the key terminologies that we generally come across when we are considering implementing CVA. Apart from the personal account and group account cash transfer solution, all other solutions, it is important to remember, are time sensitive. That means the beneficiaries will need to encash the services and the funds that are on their token or whatever type of solution they are offered within a prescribed time frame. And this time frame can be negotiated between the FSP and the implementing agency, which in this case may be ICRC. But however, once that time period is expired, then beneficiaries will not be able to avail it. So it is very important that clear communication on the time frame within which the beneficiaries can encash or avail any of these services using these cash transfer solutions is informed very, very clearly to them. The other terminology that we generally come also across when considering CVA is KYC. KYC refers to know your customer. Know your customer basically means the part where we are mandated to share data or personal details of beneficiary with the FSP, who in turn needs to share it with the central government or other institutions, government institutions, as mandated by the financial regulations of the country. Now, as simple as it may sound, sharing is not a problem, but along with it comes a lot of other risks that has recently gained impetus, and we will touch base on some of these challenges later on in the presentation. So yes, data protection becomes a key factor when we share information externally with FSPs and also somewhere down the line with the government institutions. There is another terminology that we need to be aware of is proof of entitlement. Proof of entitlement basically means the form of identity that we are using for verifying the identity of the beneficiary. This could be either voucher, token, or distribution list provided by the implementing agency. It could be anonymized e-tokens or e-voucher, e-code. Sky is the limit. As I said, as technology evolves, more and more creative solutions come out in the market. But again, with that comes added responsibility of data protection and minimizing sharing of data. So with this, I'll kind of wrap it up, and I hope we've had now a good insight into the various type of mechanisms and related transfer solutions that are offered within the region. Since we know all these now, it would be interesting to hear from our partners in the field some real lifetime field experience on what kind of type of cash transfer solutions they have used in their CVA programs. So we'll start with Philippine Red Cross, followed by Vietnam Red Cross Society. So over to Ellaine. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chhavi. Greetings from Manila, Philippines. My name is Ellaine Luzada, and I am the cash focal person of the Philippine Red Cross. So today, I will be sharing to you our cash and voucher assistance journey and how we have scaled up with the COVID-19 cash response with our financial service providers. So just to give you a brief background, as you may are aware of, Philippines is located along the Ring of Fire and is exposed to a wide range of devastating natural hazards, including earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and typhoons, many of which are seasonal in nature. The country is also affected by conflict, primarily in the remote islands of Mindanao which are characterized by high levels of poverty and chronic malnutrition. So in terms of cash visibility, the Philippines has a well-developed markets and good financial infrastructure, including a strong remittance system, making the implementation of cash and voucher assistance both practical and feasible. So there are several options for cash delivery ranging from direct disbursement to mobile phones, e-transfers, and paper vouchers. So on to PRC's cash assistance journey. Cash and voucher assistance has been part of the humanitarian response and early recovery in the Philippines since 2009. So, in response to Typhoon Haiyan in 2013, the Philippine Red Cross, in partnership with other members of the movement, was one of the 45 humanitarian organizations implementing approximately 845 million US dollars in cash assistance, some 40% of the entire relief response at that time. In addition, PRC is also an active member of the in-country National Cash Working Group and was once the chair in 2017. PRC has 103 branches and more than 1,700 staff as of 2020. So out of the 103 branches, 64 of its branches has experiences in implementing CVA. So the PRC has used CVA in cash in emergencies, as well as for livelihood support and for activities such as shelter reconstruction and WASH. PRC works in CVA not only with the support of the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent, the IFRC, but also with the International Committee of the Red Cross, the ICRC. So PRC, with the movement support, implemented the movement's biggest cash transfer program to date in response to Typhoon Haiyan, where some 59,000 households received livelihood cash grants of $220 each within the span of 3 months. So if you look at this, from 2012 to 2020, PRC was able to assist to more than 300,000 households nationwide in terms of cash assistance. So more recently, using the Red Rose system and with the support of the IFRC, the PRC distributed unconditional cash transfers in response to COVID-19 and the ongoing responses to typhoons Vamco and Goni. So I will be briefly sharing to you our ongoing COVID-19 response and other responses. So for COVID-19 response key accomplishments, in terms of targeted areas, we have simultaneous responses across several provinces in the country, the National Capital Region, a few provinces in Central and Southern Luzon, select provinces in Visayas region, and a big portion of it was implemented in an urban or peri-urban context. So the decision making on which areas or provinces are we going to do the response is based on the COVID-19 cases in their areas. So onto the modalities. So we have used a combination of in-kind, direct cash through cash and envelope and FSP, and cash per work, covering socially vulnerable families and confirmed COVID-19 cases families, affected families. So our COVID-19 response has also complemented the national government social amelioration program. And of course, we did capacity building. So we have two types of capacity building done. Number one was remote support for those of the branches or chapters that we have or that has already experiences in implementing cash. And second would be the direct technical support from the group, wherein mostly focused on the National Capital Region since this would be their first time implementing CVA in an urban context. So onto our current ongoing responses. So for the COVID-19 response, we are nearing the end of our operations. So for we have reached or served more than 21,000 families served in cash assistance. For Typhoon Goni or Roli, more than 6,000 families reached in emergency cash assistance in 3 provinces in Bicol region. For Typhoon Bamco, more than 5,000 families reached in emergency cash assistance in 4 provinces in northern and southern Luzon. So we have reached the end, most at the end of the emergency cash assistance and already transitioning in livelihood and shelter recovery interventions under these responses for these particular provinces. So it's just to show that even though we are in a pandemic situation with implementation with health protocols and limitations, the humanitarian we are still finding ways to reach those affected families by these ongoing natural hazards or disasters. Okay. So PRC was able to reach more than 300K households through the past 8 years with the assistance of an FSP. So PRC will not be able to reach that many affected households without the partnership of our FSP. And currently, PRC has existing agreements with Philippine Postal Agency, LBC Express, and Globe GCash services, all through remittance agents via mobile or partner agents. So now, so why remittance is preferred? So number one, PRC staff and volunteers need not handle cash. So we are directly relying on the FSP system to provide to reach them through their system. Next would be it has lesser administrative costs for our side since we only need to manage the transfer of funds and the beneficiaries compared to providing our assistance in kind with all of its logistical concerns. Next, the selected service providers have networks across major islands. Next, security of unpaid grants rests on third parties, and checks and balances as third parties are obliged by law to do know your customer. So it was briefly discussed by Ms. Chhavi earlier. What is the know your customer? So our FSP are also obliged by the law to do know your customer. So whenever we have distributions, the FSP is obliged to get some form of valid identification from our beneficiaries and such. The most important thing is that remittance services are widely familiar to most of the Filipino households. So, for example, our overseas Filipino workers and our local migrant workers are sending their hard-earned money from abroad and locally. So, taking advantage of this system, our decision makers chose this delivery mechanism because of the fact that remittance services are widely used here by the Filipino household. Also, considering all the experiences in the past years, PRC realized the importance of having flexible partners, especially in the urban areas. So in 2019, PRC has conducted a financial service provider mapping as first step in understanding FSP market, and currently, PRC is in negotiation with SmartPay Maya, a big telco here in the Philippines, to pilot a test cash distribution in an urban context using an e-payment solution. So this is still in the works. Okay. So over the past years, what have we learned so far? In negotiation, our first reflection is on the understanding and clarity of both parties to mandate and programmatic outcomes of the humanitarian organization and the business component of the FSP. So, clarity on these components will help especially in defining the speed and scale the humanitarian organization wants to achieve and the needed preparations for the FSP. Second, in our experience in PRC, it is always important to check the realities of the actual field capacity of the FSP. So while at some point, FSP may present good field level presence, but presence alone may not necessarily equate to strong field capacities. So in some cases, due to geographical challenges, there will be a need to perform additional administrative preparations, such as opening of local bank accounts, or in some cases, limitations on the local FSPs on reaching the local site the humanitarian organization is targeting. It really depends on the context. So these challenges may not be presented during contract negotiations. Hence, it is important that we do investigate and check from experiences of the other organizations. Third, both parties should understand contractual obligations and for the humanitarian organizations to balance decision when and how it's best to impose the penalty clause. So while in reality, it is still a gray area, especially in a context such as the Philippines, where there are constant, always ongoing emergency operations with limited providers. Penalty clauses will ensure accountability to both parties. So setting up penalty clauses in the agreement will act as a fail-safe option, but will still need balanced decision on when and how to impose it. Lastly, for the implementation, it is always helpful to maintain professional working relations with the partner. This includes challenges and operational constraints are objectively being communicated, and learning are shared all with the aims of seeking better solutions and improving the service deliveries both parties. Um, for the humanitarian organization, it is always a good practice to scan financial service market. The emerging financial service markets. So with the advancement of technology now, there could be new delivery payment solutions that may better complement the programmatic outcomes of the humanitarian organizations compared to the existing FSPs like banks and other regulated FSPs. So again, sorry. So this ends my presentation, and I'll be passing the floor to Sir Mike or to me. To me. Okay. Over to you, me.
Yes. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and greeting from Hanoi, Vietnam. My name is Pham Thanh. I'm the case focal person in Vietnam Red Cross. Today, I will share to you our case and voucher assistance journey and how we have scaled up with the COVID-19 case response with our financial service provider. To give a background, Vietnam is affected by flood, storm, and landslide annually, but it's also prone of drought and earthquake. More than 70% of the population is at risk of national disaster, compounded with associated with the rapid urbanization. While banking and digital payment infrastructure is growing rapidly, financial inclusion remains relatively low, especially in rural areas. Cash transfer was the first used in 2009. Since then, cash transfer had become a common way for organizations, the government and VNRC to support those affected by disaster. The VNRC began the sizable cash transfer program in 2009 with support from American Red Cross in response to Typhoon Crescent. And then again, 2012 up to now is response to the typhoon, flooding, drought, and COVID-19 pandemic. The achieved and success of Vietnam Red Cross is our ability to scale up can be attributed to the investment based on care we over the years. And that includes the investment made by financial service provider procurement and pilot setting since 2019. Toward the end of 2019, VNRC engaged in process finding financial service provider partner. The process entitled market analysis and consultants with other cash actors in the countries. To the date, VNRC had agreement with Vietnam Post, Viettel Pay for mobile payment solution, Agribank, Đông Á Bank, and Liên Việt Post Bank. As in many other cases, negotiating and overall experience included some challenge. Here are some of our reflections. On the question, what kind of challenge do you face when negotiating with financial providers? Firstly, let's discuss and agree with FSP on the minimum beneficiary information to be able to provide cash, and which information can be collected by Vietnam Red Cross, or which information collected by FSP, or what we can coordinate together to collect it. And the second is what identification document beneficiary need to receive money, and how to solve the household do not have a document. If they don't have a document, how to solve it, help them to receive cash. And the third one is the fee. That's very important point. We can compare with the traditional way cash in voucher assistance. And the question, how do we ensure the comply to the contract clause? As you know, all the items mentioned in the contract are also communicated to the household, such as the FSP not be allowed to collect debt from the people. And the second, during the implementation process, if there are any problem, the two parties sit together and discuss and to adjust the contract. Next question.
I think we lost me from Vietnam, but yeah, I think and I think from what she's sharing is that these are some of the challenges and that they have encountered, especially in negotiating their contracts with their existing financial service providers. And I think overall, it is important that in negotiating financial service provider contracts, first is that from what me and then Ellaine have mentioned, that we as an organization, as humanitarian organization, understand and are very clear on the types of financial services that we really wanted to engage to meet our operational needs. So both from the FSP side and then from us, we should be very clear in terms of how will the FSP address or provide solutions to meet our operational needs. Second, we need to understand the risk implications of each financial services or solutions, and those risks are understood by both organizations and our financial services provider partner. And part of those risks, as mentioned by Ellaine and me, I think they have been talking about know your customer and then data sharing. What information is required or will be required by FSP to meet the know your customer policy, mostly by the central banks of the governmental central banks. So that includes data sharing protocol, among others. And as an organization, we ask the service of FSP as our partner, and thus it is important that we maintain a professional working relationship, and that rooms for learning is continuously identified, especially in a context wherein there are limited service providers, as mentioned by Ellaine, in the Philippines. Great. So I think moving along, I think Mi will join us later when she's back. But yeah, thank you, Mi, for your presentation. Now we are, I think Mi already mentioned in her presentation around, and Ellaine as well, on data sharing protocol, and with those data sharing protocol implies data protection as one of the key considerations in negotiating contract. But I think it is we have been talking about it. It has gained momentum over the past months, I think, if you're following some trending tweets. But I think let us first understand, I think, what is data protection and why do we need to talk about data protection if we're talking about cash and voucher assistance. And so when we want to understand data protection, so the key words are personal data. When we talk about when we are understanding data protection. So what is personal data? So it says here, personal data is any information that may lead to the identification of a living natural person, which is the data subject, that can be personal even if at first glance they may not seem to be tied directly to a person, but could lead to identification indirectly by using additional information. And this may sound complicated, but it basically means that data protection covers a broad range of information, and that personal data should not be interpreted in a narrow way. In the context of cash and voucher assistance, most data you will collect from the beneficiaries who qualify as personal data. And most of, if not all these, and these are some few examples, we usually collect names and contact details, national identity numbers, bank account numbers, employment details, family situation, health condition, address, and even geolocation. And most of this information that we collect, as mentioned, can or may lead to the identification of a living person or natural person. Although data protection is not new, there's been heightened awareness on the risks and impacts related to data protection in the recent years, because we are collecting more data, particularly in cash and voucher assistance. I think we're collecting information from assessments, beneficiary registration, monitoring, evaluation, and even audit. And a good portion of that relates to affected individuals, which could be private and sensitive. Next point, digitalization is accelerating our use of digital tools and technology. We had been talking about digital payment solutions, mobile data collection, and even data management. And the shift to digital means increasing the risks to individuals in terms of their privacy, misuse, unauthorized access, unsecured sharing and storage. Beneficiaries may not have control over their data. And of course, I think in many cases and in many contexts now, governments are enacting laws and regulations that are changing. For example, I think the most popular in Europe is the GDPR, and there are equivalent laws in our respective countries. And cash practitioners are asking for more practical guidance to analyze such risks and action them. So data protection basically builds on trust. And no one wants to wait for a data protection breach that could impact the most vulnerable communities and the organization's ability to operate. So in understanding data protection, I think it is a set of principles, and it is part of the way we are working and managing data, especially of our the households that we are serving that are affected by natural disaster and crisis. And to give us challenges, share us challenges specifically on the context of the ICRC operations, I will give now the floor to Chhavi to share some of their experiences. So over to you, Chhavi.
Thank you, Michael. Hello again, everyone. So as you know, as I mentioned earlier, as technology evolves, it provides a wide array of cash transfer solutions, but with it comes increased responsibility for data protection to ensure no unnecessary exposure no unnecessary exposure is made to the beneficiary. So there are many challenges, but some of the notables that we generally come across and the common ones that we generally face when sharing data are the first one is FSP's lack of understanding of the humanitarian context and its consequential misuse of data. So FSPs are typically fail to understand how the standard banking practices of screening beneficiaries and profiling can contradict their own set way of working, as well as the do no harm principle of ICRC or humanitarian sectors. They simply cannot visualize how it is in contradiction with their standard practices of profiling and screening of beneficiaries. Sometimes it is genuinely because they really do not understand how the humanitarian sector works and how the core foundation principles of neutrality, impartiality form the core foundation and basis of our work. But sometimes they also don't want to understand because they want to protect their actions in front of the government and state institutions. Also, it is important to remember that FSPs are normally or generally profit-oriented organizations. So they are tempted to use this data for their own commercial interests, such as profiling for credit worthiness, marketing, advertising, as well as checking eligibility to gain other financial services. So it is very important that if data is shared with FSPs, terms and conditions are clearly agreed and followed through until the end of the program, until the end of the CVA implementation program, which means when the data is finally disposed and deleted from their database. So yeah, it comes with a lot of challenge because humanitarian context is not very well known to the corporate commercial sectors. So that's one big challenge that we have to deal with. Secondly, FSPs are subject to the national laws, as mentioned earlier, and hence are mandated by the to report or share the beneficiary data with the central bank or the government institutions. These institutions, government institutions, run the names provided in the list through various type of lists, such as watch list, sanction list, list of specially designated individuals involved in corruption, laundering activities, as a result of which certain names may be flagged or frozen and removed from receiving any kind of assistance. Now, this again comes into direct conflict with the humanitarian core principles of neutrality and impartiality of intervention. So it becomes difficult. It is a challenge to make sure that because as you know, the humanitarian sector is neutral, and ICRC in particular would like to serve the most vulnerable, irrespective of whatever background they may have. So this is a big challenge, and hence it is always advised that in such country, when we are considering implementing CVA programs in specially sensitive operating context, it is important to make a thorough assessment of the country and the program context before considering setting up a cash voucher assistance program in that sensitive environment. The third challenge that comes along with it is, as you know, data protection has recently gained a lot of impetus during the past few months, years, and we've been, as you've seen, a lot of messages on Twitter and CALP and other cash forums talking about how should we tackle this, how should we do this. So it's a relatively new subject and as such is still a work in progress, for which we don't have all the right answers at this point. But it is definitely something that it is new, and we have to come up with innovative solutions to address this, as well as mitigate the sharing of data with FSPs. As technology is involved, following up on contractual obligations involves a lot of expertise and expert knowledge from the IT sector. This means additional resources and expert IT knowledge. And obviously, sometimes we are working in very remote locations with minimal capacity and minimal resources. So it is difficult to kind of ensure that you have all the resources that you need to ensure that ensure the security of the data protection. But so it remains a challenge. But of course, there are ways we can do it. But it definitely requires additional resources and funding and expert IT knowledge. For example, when beneficiary data is shared with the FSP, we should not only be concerned with how the FSP is managing or handling that data, but we also need to consider other factors as to how is the data served, protected, where is it stored, who has access to this data, how do they dispose the data once the CVA program has completed as per the contractual norms. So there are a lot of challenges involved in ensuring data protection. And IT solutions is definitely one way, but again, it requires expert IT knowledge, and that results in additional financial resources, which is not always possible, especially if you're running a small-scale CVA program. Another challenge that we generally come across is data retention and storage years. So this is another challenge we face. So again, as part of the financial regulations of the operating context of the country we are implementing CVA in, the data retention and storage years are warranted or governed by the national financial regulations of the country. In certain countries, you may negotiate the data retention years, but in certain countries, it's absolutely non-negotiable, as a result of which you will just have to comply and stick to the country's financial regulations. So in this context, imagine the time lag. Some of the retention years can range from 5 to 10 years. So it is a very big time lag from when you have implemented and from when you will be terminating or ensuring that the data has been disposed properly. Sometimes the operations may have wrapped up in this country, and it requires additional resources or some kind of electronic way to ensure that data is not being misused after we have left or wrapped up our operations. So the time lag is really long, and it remains a challenge how you will monitor this after such a large time lag. The other challenge that we often also encounter is that when we want to share data, we need to ensure that we cannot just share data over email, which is the easiest way, or providing a paper copy of the data of beneficiaries. We need to ensure that we are sharing data by secured means. That means either encrypting the file or making sure that the data is stored in safe, secure rooms, or ensuring that where there is limited access provided to only authorized personnel. Another challenge that's not mentioned here, but that comes to my mind, we as logisticians face it all the time, is that some FSPs do not want to deal with contracting procedures. Most of the humanitarian sector have, due to the compliance and donor requirements, are subject to strict adherence of tender guidelines and rules. And a lot of paperwork, a lot of accountability is ensured to ensure a successful tender process. Sometimes these vendors find it very heavy and paper intensive, and so they don't want to back out, and they don't really find the value, the financial value that will reward them for the amount of work that needs to be put in for preparing a tender. It is the reality. And related to that is also that sometimes we come across situations where they don't want to use the implementing agency's contract template, and that adds another layer that you need to go for legal verification, both sides. Whether it is we accepting their template, then we also have to go through our own legal review process, and then it's all time consuming and adds up to the challenge. So you can see, I mean, these are the ground realities we face. It's not an easy topic, as I said, as mentioned by Michael. It is a new topic that is evolving, and there is no one fix or answer to the various problems and issues, concerns we face around this data protection, from donor requirements to ensuring contractual obligations are followed through. So it's still a work in progress. But yeah, I mean, there are ways we can work around it by ensuring that a thorough risk assessment has been done. We have mitigation measures in place, and there are various other tools that we could deploy to ensure that data is protected in the right way. Thank you. That's it from my side. Over to you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chhavi. Yes, and that indeed is a very informative sharing of the main challenges in ensuring data protection. And maybe I think from a practical side, it may sound that for us, even for example, for us cash practitioner, it may sound just one liner in our agreement or in the process that we usually facilitate, but it actually it means a lot in terms of ensuring data protection. And ensuring data protection is also ensuring the dignity of the people that we are serving, especially in times of crisis. So it is important for us to consider how do we take all these challenges and ensure data protection in our programming. So thank you very much, Chhavi. Now we proceed to our question and answer. We've been talking a lot, so we wanted to hear from our participants of the sessions. So let us check if we have questions. Maybe Andrew can help us on the questions and how do we facilitate those questions.
Thank you. We have several questions in the chat box. So while we're waiting for the participants to come up with other questions, maybe you can address some of the questions in the chat box. We also welcome everyone to turn on your microphone and video and then asking directly to the panelists. But while waiting for that, please address the questions in the chat box. Over to you, Michael.
Great, thank you, Andrew. So yeah, I think I can see first question from Wesley George. And his question is, with the new technology and trends, how can we reach people that don't have access to technology, and how can we close the gap between digital divide? And I think this is a very challenging question. I think while I've been telling this to our colleagues in the national societies, while using new technology is very sexy and it facilitates the efficiency of our work, but we need to ensure that in choosing the modality, ensuring the access of the people that we wanted to serve is the primary consideration. So what is the how can people address or meet cash, or how do they usually meet their basic needs? Is it through cash or maybe to other needs? So as mentioned, it boils down to how well do we do our response options analysis, because at some point, while new technology is very sexy and new and indeed help us in the efficiency of our work, the ultimate goal for us is to provide the immediate needs of the people that we wanted to serve. And if those humanitarian needs cannot be addressed with technology, I think we have to go back to our drawing board and check our response options and check what are the other options. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm not sure, Chhavi, if you wanted to add in that.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Just wanted to add, yes, I mean, there are various ways, as Michael mentioned, that we could mitigate the digital divide. There are options, as you would have heard in my presentation of the various type of cash transfer solutions available. You know, setting up voucher activity or digital cash have preconditions of, like, you know, having the right infrastructure, network, data. And so not every solution is possible in every location. In solutions in certain remote locations, as I mentioned, over-the-counter distribution could be used. Over-the-counter, where you contract an Fsp to set up an ad hoc over-the-counter distribution in the field to provide direct cash directly to the beneficiaries in the field where no digital learning is required or digital education is required. Second one is cash in envelope. You can go the traditional way, but of course it's losing its shine because of the risks involved, the heavy risks. Now every agency is very particular about the high risks involved, and they always want to mitigate. That is why we, for us humanitarian actors, the preferred option is always outsourcing, so that we reduce our risk using FSPs. So there are solutions around this. And the most important is beneficiary education, beneficiary digital education. So if in a particular location we absolutely have to use digital cash or whatever, we have the community engagement folks who will sensitize the beneficiaries. Before we implement the CVA program, they will have to be educated. Here's the code. This is how you use it. This is the mobile phone. Until they are absolutely ready and to receive or be able to access that cash through this digital forms of cash transfer solutions, I think that is the first step before we implement a digital divide. So yeah, you can use traditional methods, or you could sensitize or upgrade the skills and education and learning of beneficiaries before you implement certain or various type of solutions. So yeah, there are ways around it, but of course requires extra effort. So thank you. I think we may have addressed a bit of it, Resli.
Great. I think that's a very good question. No, I think while everyone is going with using fancier technology, but I think the overall, let's not forget that the overall purpose of why are we providing assistance is to meet the humanitarian needs of the people that we serve, and that should be the main frame of our assistance. Let us go to the next questions, and for the participant, feel free to type in, challenge us. So I have here from Ronnie Arap Jr., but I think this is not a question, but more of a comment. So the data collected for case management in humanitarian assistance or program are classified as sensitive personal information, or SPI, correct? Which is very vulnerable to fraud in the future, as these SPI are the same information that are in reference to validate someone who is doing business transactions such as loans, financial transactions, among others. I agree that there should be a drive for humanitarian agencies to understand data protection in depth and avoid technological risk. I think I totally agree with this, Ronnie. I think, as mentioned by Chhavi, data protection is, although it's not new, but it's gaining momentum in the discussion, and we are all still learning from this. I think ICRC, Federation of our National Society, are still learning from how do we ensure that the data of the people we serve are protected and other risks are mitigated. And we have one more question from Sofika Ahmad, I think from this Pakistan Red Crescent. How to restrict the data, as we are getting data through the RCRs to our volunteers to mobile application. Yeah, I think this is a very specific question. No? I think there are many ways. I think, and I think I will give the floor to Chhavi on how ICRC is doing it specifically.
So yes, thank you, Michael. So there are various ways we could restrict data, if not actually completely. So one of the ways we could restrict the use of data is by using FSPs who are willing to provide anonymized cards or identity protected ATM cash transfer solutions. I know it's not very readily available in the market, but there are some, depending on the value or the volume of your cash program, some FSPs are willing to customize it according to your needs, which means you don't have to share any data and can use the agency, implementing agency's name or as the account holder. So anonymized ways of using e-tokens, e-voucher, prepaid cards, or using only negotiating with the FSP to provide cash by using corporate accounts of agencies, as opposed to providing individual information on individual beneficiaries. We have been using this in Yemen. We are using this in some cases in some other sensitive operating context countries. But in Yemen, we are able to use this. In certain other countries in Africa, North Africa, we have also used it. But it is a negotiation that involves, that is to be done with the FSP. The second one is that you should restrict the use of the data or to authorized personnel only. I don't think it should, the way data is being shared, the way it is being stored should have restrictions on them, or who can say, and as well as the rights, which level of information is to be shared with whom. So those are all other ways that we could minimize or restrict the abuse of data. Anonymized cards is one way, as I mentioned earlier, and as well as ensuring that there's authorized use of the data. These are some of the ways, if not all, and as technology evolves, we'll have more ways to kind of restrict data. And most importantly, please make a thorough assessment of your FSP before you venture into implementing your CVA program. As I said earlier, there is no one solution or answer for everything, and it's never going to be perfect. We are in the field, we face realities every day. Data protection is something that as I said, it's still a work in progress. It is a very evolving subject, and I think even the biggest of biggest NGOs are still working, and every day is a new challenge, and we are learning and innovating. So please make a thorough assessment also of what risks you have. At least if you know what the risks are, you will have mitigation strategies in place. So a thorough assessment is another way of the FSP and the data of where it will be used, how is it stored, where is it managed, use of encrypted data, field tracing, proper file tracing backups. These are some measures that you could use also to minimize and restrict the use of data. Over. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Chhavi. And I think we hope that that answered the questions. I don't see any other questions now, but we encourage everyone, if you have questions more, we will be more than happy to address those questions, maybe even offline. And later on we'll give you our contact details if you wanted to reach out, and if you have burning questions that you don't want to share in this platform. Okay. Yeah, I think that pretty much that sums up our discussion. But maybe to share, I'll just share again my slides. Yeah, so this is what we wanted to ask everyone, or maybe to our panel member first, to Vietnam Red Cross, Philippine Red Cross, and maybe questions to us, ICRC and IFRC. And especially with the growing use of cash and voucher assistance in the region, especially in Southeast Asia, cash has been an integral component of the many major responses over the past 10 years in our region. But what can we do to better advocate for cash and voucher as an effective response mechanism within the region? So maybe we'll ask the question first to Ellaine, just to share your insights on this question.
What can we do better to advocate for CVA as an effective response mechanism? For me, I think better understanding of the programmatic risk is essential. So, as mentioned earlier, simple risk matrix does not hurt. I think there is a need to increase the understanding on risk associated with new financial services, especially at the country level, both by the humanitarian organization and financial service providers. So, with the advancement of technology, especially in Southeast Asia, it's important that organizations have greater understanding on the various risks associated with the new emerging financial solutions in addressing humanitarian needs. And these risks are mitigated with the aim of enhancing the quality of CVA implementation. That's it for me.
Thank you very much, Ellaine. And indeed, a simple matrix a simple risk matrix doesn't really hurt. So if we can properly identify those and plan based on our cash and voucher responses, based on how we see and mitigate the risk, I think those are essential components of a quality program. Especially with the new emerging technology and advancement in technology now. So it's important that we properly assess the risks associated with those technology. I cannot see me from Vietnam Red Cross online, but And I think just also maybe to share my personal reflection on this. I think we have a lot of things that we can do better collectively as cash actors or cash practitioner in Southeast Asia. First is improve organizational capacities on FSP procurement. So ensuring that humanitarian organizations, even government, understand the nuances of FSP procurements, and that while policies, procurement policies may be applied. So of course, I think the usual stuff, the basic things in procurement, we need to provide 3 quotations and those things, and comparative business analysis and those stuff. But more important is that policies are flexible to ensure that the ultimate goal is to provide the most needed humanitarian assistance in a safe and most efficient means. I think in the first session in this morning, agility and flexibility is important in addressing rapidly and scale of responses, with the ultimate goal of really addressing the humanitarian needs of the affected population. And this can be achieved when program colleagues and our logistics and procurement colleagues work more closely and hand in hand. And I think also second point is, and we've been encouraging this even at the country level, even at the regional level, to learn from others' experiences. And this has been proven as one of the best practice from South Asia to Southeast Asia and even to other regions in our sub-regions in our region. So learn from others, and participation to humanitarian coordination is important. And we wanted to encourage, especially our cash practitioners in the country, to go out and seek for the cash working group in your respective country. It takes a considerable time and effort and resources to map out which financial service providers are available, in addition to the key qualities of the services they have to offer. So further, it is agreed on paper may be different. So as mentioned by Ellaine, the Philippine Red Cross has conducted FSP mapping in their respective countries. Can that FSP mapping be shared to other organizations? I think World Food Program has been doing FSP mapping in their in many other countries in the region, and that is widely shared, especially at the cash working group level. So seek out, reach out to the cash practitioners, seek out to the cash working group in your respective countries. Yeah, and then I think that's just from me, and then I'll maybe over to you, Chhavi, for your final thoughts.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. So a few other thoughts on how to advocate for a better. So as mentioned in Elaine's presentation, I think one of the key ways that we have experienced success in implementing CVA programs is through proper coordination and consistent coordination with the cash working group. If we don't have one, I think it's always advisable to set up one where all the humanitarian actors can come together as CVA practitioners and agree on a common consensus. This way, the FSPs also know that the humanitarian sector is united. Rates are going to be more or less consolidated. Not that they are providing Red Cross a different rate and other agencies another rate. So the CVA cash working group would be an effective way to kind of advocate for a successful and effective implementation of CVA. Another thing that we could look into, I mean, it sounds very easy, but actually it takes a lot of steps because it has constraints as it is governed by different financial regulations of the country. But by and large, because it is the ASEAN region, I think some things are very much in common. We could enter into regional framework agreements, with partners like UN, Red Cross, other agencies, which agencies involved in cash programs can fit in some kind of agreement wherein all humanitarian sectors can avail of the rates, terms and conditions to be consistent. Because, as I mentioned earlier, FSPs are profit-oriented organizations. So if you don't negotiate well, you can give another rate to Red Cross, you can give another rate to a UN, you can give another rate to another NGO. So I think there is a value in coming up with regional framework agreements, if not global. One of the other things I mentioned and Michael mentioned is ensuring a proper assessment mapping of the FSP. If you know what exists in your countries, as I said, there's not going to be a perfect solution, but if we know what the risks are, ensure that you have mitigation measures. And involving the government is also one step that will help implement or advocate for cash programming. And last but not the least, we need to distinguish between data processor and data controller. Data processors are those who use data that is already existing in a certain database, or for example, if you are using bank accounts as a cash transfer solution, and it is known that the beneficiaries already have accounts, it means they have already shared their KYC with the bank. So in that case, the implementing agency is not directly going out there and collecting information to opening an account. So in that case, the implementing agency is data processor, which I have to say mitigates the risk of data protection, of being the owner, having complete ownership of the data. But at the same time, it does put a lot of onus on the data owner or data controller, which in this case will be the bank or the FSP. Another example is sometimes in many contexts, we use UNHCR ID cards. In such context, UN is really the data controller, whereas other agencies using their mechanism or ID forms are data processors. So in this kind of situation, it is better to enter into an agreement wherein the roles and responsibilities is very clear of who is data processor, who is data controller, because if there are two partners are involved, it is important to know how the data is being handled and who is sharing where. And another aspect is to share with the beneficiary that we are sharing data with these and these people. So beneficiary consent is another very important aspect to ensure successful and flawless implementation of cash voucher programs. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Chhavi. And yeah, I thank you for that insights. I think we have so much. I think there are a lot of things to. There's so much things that we can think of on how can we best advocate for cash in Southeast Asia. But I think we can all agree that the best way is to learn from others. The best way is to coordinate and discuss and talk from one another. I think it is cost efficient. Just knowing what others is doing and then sharing the learnings. I think that's one of the best things that we can do, especially when data protection wherein it is still new and we have so much things to learn and maybe discover that we don't know yet. And with that, I think that ends our session. I know that there are some few questions in our chat box, but I think some of those are being answered already. But we will go back to those questions. For some of those questions that are not answered, we'll go back to the chat box and then we will provide the answers offline. So we will keep in touch. And with that, I would like to thank again the AHA Center for organizing this focus session. I would like to thank ICRC, Chhavi, for being our co-moderator and co-hosting with me. And of course, I would like to thank me from Vietnam and then Ellaine from Philippine Red Cross for being part of this focus session. And with that, thank you very much. I will give back the floor to Andrew.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Michael, Chhavi, Ellaine, and me for your wonderful presentations. And thank you also for all participants for joining us. So in the chat box, you will see a link that I shared. It's a feedback form. Please fill in this feedback forms. And also there's a questions whether they can get your presentations for further learning. So please, if it is possible, then just send it to us at the AHA Center, then we will distribute to the participants of today's sessions. Okay, to close the session, I would like everyone to turn on your camera, turn on your video, and we will take group photos. Please open your camera. Still waiting? Can I see faces of participants? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Seems that is disabled, yeah? Let me check. Sorry. Okay. Please try it again now. Whether you can. Oh, okay. Great. Please try it again to open your camera, and we'll take a group photos. Can we have some more participants opening the camera? Okay. Okay, on 3. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, great. Thank you very much. And I see that Bu Adelina is part of the participants. Bu Adelina, you have anything to say for today's session?
Not so much, Andrew. I've been listening, but I'd like to thank IFRC as well as the colleagues who have been presenting for organizing this session together with the AHA Center. And I learned a lot, and I hope that we can continue the discussion. I know that a lot of challenges when it comes to cash-based assistance. So looking forward to learning from you as well as those who have done it. Thank you again.
Thank you. We'll take